Hello, and welcome to another edition of Creative Current. I'm your host, Shana Stambrot, and with us in the studio today is one of my favorite painters in LA, and one of my favorite people too, Mark Dutcher.
Hello.
On a triumphant yet jet-lagged return from just a few days ago, celebrating his first proper New York gallery opening. Huge, big deal. Tell me how excited you are right now about this.
Well, thank you for having me on here. I don't know. It was very exciting for me to go to New York, and it was something I dreamed about for many years. So it was kind of nerdy. When I first got there and walked into the gallery, I started crying. But, you know, it was just, I don't know. For me, you know, I think for most artists, it's something that they dream about, you know, it's having a show in New York. And
during Armory Week.
Right, so. And then, you know, it was stressful and just, you know, it was like a show here. and I'm glad to be back.
Surprisingly like a show here.
And I'm glad to be back and back into my studio, so.
Excellent. Well, that's true. You paint more than you do anything else. You're always in your studio. There's a huge amount of dedication there. But about these particular paintings, what's interesting, so I've known you a long time, and it's almost like every time there's been a show, it's been something not completely different, but there's been like a major shift sort of every time.
Several of the paintings in the show are, I'm calling them my Sunnylands paintings, and they're based on a project that my boyfriend worked on in Palm Springs called Sunnylands, the Anneberg Estate.
Okay.
And he restored the Anneberg Estate there, and I did a series of paintings based on the colors of that Mrs. Anneberg's estate. So the walls surrounded, the estate's surrounded by a pink wall.
That's what that pink stucco color is.
Yeah. So I started with that as a basic background for the paintings, and then I started putting words into the landscape. And the paintings first started out with as this idea of, you know, I wanted to put into the landscape all the names of every man that I've loved that has died. I started with that idea, and then all the men I've ever loved, you know, so, and there was this idea of layering people's names over each other until they became kind of, you know, like they started canceling each other out. It became an act of erasure, like
Visually. Because just the addition of all of the words started making things illegible.
Yeah.
That's what memory does.
Yeah. And so that was the start for that series of paintings. And then I started adding fragments of songs as I was in the studio working on them. And so a lot of Joy Division songs started coming up into the paintings, and just people's initials. Anything that as I was working on the painting, that came across as being authentic in the moment as I was applying the word to the canvas. So sometimes when I'm painting, I'm listening to music, so, you know, that's how those marks came to being. And it was this idea that I was trying to transfer something real from, you know, like emotional, onto the canvas and using words as the vehicle for that. So then the words started becoming just mark making and symbol.
You know, you've previously done work that's been completely abstract, no text, no object, you know, and then these which have actual words that in theory you can read.
I think people try to decipher artwork in a way that makes sense to them, to their experience. But, you know, as I'm making the work, it's not the idea that you can read everything in the painting or know the complete story of what's happening. You know, it's more important to have an experience with it. And if your experience is that you're trying to decipher the painting, that's cool. But I'm more interested in this idea of either what Rothko was trying to do for me. When I'm in front of a Rothko painting, I'm having an experience with the essence of the painting, and I want to transfer that to the painting and have that somehow affect the viewer. I think that's really important to me in my artwork, is even when I was doing, you know, like how you were talking about that I do change kind of bodies of work, or, you know, like similar to Guston.
you're not just offhandedly saying Augustin. It's like you've read every word.
Right.
And, you've gone sort of in there and then come back out. And that's why I think I like to think of you and Gustin as partly the dynamic of the change, but also partly because there's formal sort of influences in the way things are drawn that I can see an influence even though it's not any kind of copy or anything. But you can definitely tell there's like that slightly vibrating, kind of nervous, cartoony kind of line. Objects are drawn. They're not, there's line work. You're drawing it and then you're painting. It's not this kind of amorphous thing. They're very, kind of crisp, and they remind me of him in that way. And also, you like that same nasty pink that you like so much. If I had to pick one word that linked all this, and there's even more bodies of work we haven't even talked about yet, I would call it storytelling. And how I explain that is because in some of the pictures, and now I've just learned, even in the ones where there aren't pictorial objects in the pictures, seemingly, that there's always a narrative, a specific thing. It's not just this like raw emotional outburst. It's you're there, engaged with it, and you're telling a story. I still have all my envelope galleries. Like a gallery that would have periodic group shows, except it only existed in Staples envelopes that got mailed to you, and it would be small multiples and tiny objects and bits of writing on a curated theme.
And with several artists doing individual pieces inside this envelope.
And I just thought it was the most brilliant thing I've ever seen in my life. I always wish I thought of it because it's that genius.
I would usually center the gallery show around a theme, and then invite artists to do multiples. And the idea for that was because I didn't have a gallery at the time, and I didn't want to wait. And so I wanted to show my work, and my friends wanted to show their work. And I thought, why not do a gallery inside an envelope?
You're mailing invitations anyway.
And also to give you something to do at the art opening, to have an interaction with someone. Because I wanted to talk about art. I was tired of going to art openings and not talking about what we all do. It was almost like that was the last thing people were embarrassed to talk about making art. And so this was a way of some sort of exchange and sort of kind of breaking the ice.
And I'm a huge fan of the way that you exist on Facebook. You're using Facebook in the way that if we live in a good and just world, it was intended. It's back to this idea of the life of the artist in the studio. What is it like to be an artist alone in the studio? And the fingerprint in the paint, and this is how I'm feeling about the art I'm making right now. I mean, it's not confessional in a sort of like TMI kind of way. It's confessional in a creative process kind of way. So it is emotional, it is deep, but it's not aggressively private or anything like that. And what I've noticed is they're always really thoughtful, and sometimes you ask people, you start little conversations and you get people so that we're having the conversations you say you miss at galleries. We're talking about art. And then when you were in New York, people were your Facebook friends are now your friends in real life. Which again is how it's supposed to work.
And they're working artists or other artists who I respect, and we exchange, we create a dialogue, and on the Facebook page we talk about what it's like to start a painting, what happens when you have some sort of creative block.
Or when you've made a horrible mistake.
What I wanted to do is just be as honest as I could be. I can't say everything. I mean, there's some topics that are harder to talk about than others, like maybe financial things, but I wanted to be honest and share what it's like to be the struggle as an artist, to have a gallery, not have a gallery, to want to show your work, not have a space, to show the work. And I mean, because of Facebook, things have happened. I've gotten shows, I've sold work through Facebook. I mean, I'm not promoting, it's not to promote Facebook. It's just this idea
We'll be using Facebook to promote this interview in a couple of weeks, so we love them.
Yeah.
We're good with
But
Facebook.
it's just more this idea of just trying to not be afraid to do something outside of what people think you should be doing.
Like Philip Guston.
Right.
See how I did that?
Right,
Just
yeah.
brought it back around like
Yeah.
that. See?
I think that every artist needs to ask himself, at the end of the day, why am I doing this? Who am I making this for? And and I think a lot of art now is about luxury products, and I'm not interested in that at all. That's why it's hard to talk about money and sales, because I think many artists, they want to sell the work and they want to make a living off of it, but that's not why they're making the work.
Well, one other thing that we're celebrating is this publication of this new book,
Right.
which for one thing is a collaboration with an amazing poet.
My best friend of 31 years.
So your friend of your whole adult life,
Right.
paired with your artwork,
Right.
specifically a series we haven't really talked about yet, tattered, ruinated, shiny objects.
Right.
And it was this sort of like stairway to heaven thing of like, yeah, it's shiny.
Right.
It's precious metal.
Right.
It looks like a bum's been sleeping on
Right.
it. Not, I mean, in the
Right.
sense of how
It's
distressed
having
the surface is.
That tension between something that's pretty and shiny and maybe luxury, but also that's in ruin.
Let's hear one of the poems from the book, read by its author, Ma Shane Wynn.
Castaway. There, now here, where a solitary pair swim in separate circles. The water falls into circular space. Castaway this year and another year and another year before, on an island, the sand and the land, where the pair made a pact to swim in separate tides, trunks. Truncation, a vacation. Now here, not here.
Ruins of a Glittering Palace is available
Through Spa Press.
through Spa Press. Oh God, just go to his Facebook page.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a link there somewhere.
Somewhere on
But it's so
I will
interesting
put
to
one
me
up.
because despite all of the changes that you make, there's always this thing of a story and a backstory,
Right.
and So the new work, or is there new work? There's only stretched canvases,
Right,
but
right.
do you have a sense yet of what this change is going to be? Because
I'm
it's
now
going to change, right?
Right. So I still have the words, because I have a couple paintings that didn't make it into the show in New York. But so they have words on the canvas, but now I'm imposing a grid structure on top of the words. But that could change tomorrow.
Right.
I don't know what will happen with the paintings next, and so I feel like I have to keep on going, because that's what artists do. They go to the studio and paint.
Well, I'm really excited, though. Honestly, talking to you only makes me want to hear more. So you have to come back and tell us about whatever you end up doing next. Promise.
Oh, Shayna, you've just been the best person.
Oh,
I just love
let's
you.
get a hug on camera. First ever Creative Current end of show hug. You saw it here first. So thank you very much for sticking with another episode of Creative Current, and we will see you next week.